I got home a little later than usual that day. The waiting room at the clinic had been full, and my knees didn't move as quickly as they used to. I had a bag of groceries in one hand, a folder of blood work results in the other, and a vague ache blooming at the base of my spine. I was halfway through the front door when I noticed the silence. No Nora running down the hallway. No toys scattered across the living room floor. Just an odd stillness. Then I saw it. My suitcase. Sitting beside the door to the garage. Closed. Zipped. And stacked neatly with the basket of laundry I'd folded that morning. Grayson leaned against the kitchen counter. Arms crossed. Phone in hand. "Hey," he said, like nothing was unusual. "We had to make a few adjustments." I didn't speak. Not yet. I waited. "Mom and Dad are coming." He continued. "Permanently. They'll need the guest suite." I looked toward the hallway that led to my room, where I'd stayed for 3 years. Ever since Jules was born and they'd asked me to move in to help, where I kept my sewing kit, my teas, the rocking chair Kalina gave me for my birthday. "It's only fair," he said. "They're older than you, and they've never had a proper visit." Behind him, Kalina walked in holding Jules. Her eyes met mine for a second, then shifted to the floor. She didn't say a word. Nora stood halfway down the stairs, frozen. She clutched the rail with one hand, her school bag dangling from her shoulder. "I already set up a cot in the garage for you," Grayson added. "You'll have your own space, a little heater and everything. It's temporary." I didn't reply. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I simply nodded, turned, and carried my groceries into the kitchen like nothing had changed, though everything already had. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I opened the old wooden chest at the back of the closet and pulled out a small silver key. The garage smelled faintly of old paint and motor oil. Someone had cleared a corner, shoved the lawn equipment aside, and rolled out a foldable cot with a single blanket and a small space heater beside it. A metal shelf stood nearby, half full with tools and dusty board games. My suitcase was already placed at the foot of the cot. I stood there for a moment, then slowly sat down. The air was colder than the rest of the house. The concrete beneath my feet made my joints ache. Still, I didn't complain. I pulled the blanket around my shoulders and sat in the quiet. That night, I heard them laughing at the dinner table. The voices of Grayson and Kalina floated through the garage wall, her a bit more muted. His always louder than necessary. I didn't hear Nora. The next morning, I went about my routine as usual. I made breakfast before anyone else stirred. Buttered toast for Jules. Packed Nora's lunch. Grayson walked into the kitchen mid-sentence, still on a call, and grabbed coffee without looking at me. Kalina said a soft thank you when I handed her a thermos. She didn't meet my eyes. Later, Nora slipped into the garage when no one was watching. She carried a folded blanket in her arms. "This one's thicker," she said, holding it out. "You'll be warmer." I took it and smoothed the edges. "Thank you." "Sweet pea," she lingered. "It's not right," she mumbled. "You shouldn't be out here." I touched her cheek and smiled. Sometimes adults make strange choices. But I'm okay. That afternoon, while Grayson's parents were still on the road, he began rearranging furniture, excitedly pointing out where his mother's recliner would go. Kalina just nodded, wiping down the counters. Grayson mentioned how nice it was going to be. Finally, having real support around the house, I stirred the soup quietly, my hands steady even though my chest wasn't, that night. While folding my clothes into an old cedar box beside the cot, I tucked the silver key beneath a wool scarf. I knew now that I'd be using it sooner than I thought. The next few days passed in quiet patterns, the kind that wear you down more than loud ones. Conrad and Merla arrived with more suitcases than a cruise line. Grayson greeted them like royalty. I stayed out of the way, letting the shadows swallow me in the garage. I cooked, I folded, I kept my hands busy. Merla complained about the mattress before she even set her purse down. Conrad asked if there were any real butter in the house. Grayson nodded, saying, "Don't worry, my mother's got standards." Kalina didn't say much at all. On the third night, I overheard them laughing about something at the dinner table. Something about people overstaying their welcome. Merla's voice said, "Can you believe she was living here rent-free and someone Grayson?" I think chuckled. I didn't flinch. I just wiped Jules's spoon clean and set it gently on the drying rack. After everyone went to bed, I sat on the cot and stared at the sliver of moonlight cutting across the concrete floor. My hands moved on their own, pulling the old cedar box toward me. I lifted the scarf and retrieved the small silver key. The cabin had been my husband's idea. He'd bought the plot when Nora was just a baby. Fixed the place up with his own hands, plank by plank. When he died, I couldn't bear to go back. I told myself it was too far, too lonely, too much work, but that was never really the truth. I didn't go because no one asked me to. I stayed where I was needed. But now, I wasn't needed. I was managed. I took a worn envelope from the cedar box, slipped a single folded note inside, and wrote Nora's name across the front. Then I walked into the house while it was still dark, opened the drawer in her little desk, and placed the letter beneath her pencils quietly, carefully, as if placing a part of myself there. By morning, I had packed what little I owned and loaded it into the back of the car. The only sound in the garage was the low hum of the heater as I closed the door behind me. The roads were empty at that hour, just me, the dark stretch of highway, and the steady rhythm of the engine. I didn't leave a note. I didn't owe them one. I'd done enough explaining, enough forgiving. The cabin was 5 hours north, tucked into a wooded bend near a lake we used to visit on weekends. The last time I'd seen it was after the funeral, when I couldn't bear to be around anything that still smelled like him. We'd built it together. He laid the beams. I sanded the floor. It was our quiet place, the one spot in the world where no one asked anything of us. When I pulled up the gravel drive, pine needles crunched under the tires. The porch had weathered some, and the front steps moaned when I walked across them. But the key turned like it always had. Inside, dust hung in the air like a held breath. The curtains were yellowed, the fireplace cold. But everything was still there, the iron kettle, the wicker chair, the coat hooks he carved from driftwood. I lit a fire, opened the windows, and watched the smoke stretch into the trees. I made tea. I wiped the windowsills. I swept, not because I had to, but because it was mine. Every inch of that space was layered with memory. But it didn't ache the way I thought it would. It just felt quiet, honest. That night, I curled into the old sofa with a wool blanket pulled to my chin. The stars blinked through the window, and I let my breath slow to match the stillness outside. I didn't know what the next week would bring, but for the first time in years, I wasn't bracing for someone else's needs. In the morning, I stepped onto the porch with my tea and watched the fog lift off the lake. And then I remembered the letter I'd left for Nora tucked neatly under her pencils, sealed with just a name and an address, back at their house. The seams began to split faster than I expected. Kalina called once. I didn't answer. She didn't leave a voicemail. From the quiet of my cabin, I imagined the rhythms of the house I'd left behind. Breakfast chaos with no one to butter toast. Jules wailing while Kalina scrambled for clean clothes. Grayson offering no help beyond another opinion. Merla pointing out dust. Conrad flipping through channels and complaining about the noise. I knew them too well. The second day, I got a text from Kalina. "Are you okay?" I stared at it, fingers hovering over the screen, then set the phone down and turned it off. I spent my hours tending to small things. I cleaned the stone steps, rewrote old recipes into a new notebook, opened the windows each afternoon to let in the pine-sweet air. I didn't rush. I didn't answer to anyone. By the fourth day, I had begun to hum again, quiet, tuneless melodies while I worked. That used to drive Nora wild with curiosity. Grandma, what song is that? She'd ask. I always said, one I haven't named yet. The mailbox sat at the end of the drive, rusty and tilting slightly. I straightened it one morning, not because I expected mail, but because it felt right to stand it tall again. That evening, I sat with tea on the porch and listened to the hush of forest settling. Then, in the far distance, I thought I heard the faint crunch of tires over gravel. It didn't alarm me. I set my cup down and waited. A few moments later, I saw her Nora. Her backpack was crooked on her shoulders, and her hair was pulled back in a loose braid. In one hand, she held the letter. I found it. She said, I waited until Mom took my brother out for groceries, then asked Mrs. Noren down the street to drive me. I opened my arms. She didn't hesitate. That night, as she curled beside me on the old sofa, I added another log to the fire and pulled the blanket up over her shoulders. She slept soundly that night, her hand resting gently on mine as if afraid I'd disappear. I stayed awake for a while, watching the firelight dance across the ceiling beams, feeling her steady breath beside me. In the morning, I made pancakes, just the way she liked them, thin, crisp at the edges, with warm maple syrup and berries. She ate quietly, her eyes moving across the little cabin like it was a painting she'd stepped into. I left a note for Mom. She said between bites, told her I was going to stay with you. She's always busy. And Dad doesn't even notice when I'm gone. I didn't say anything at first. I just poured her another glass of milk and waited. They made me move out of my room. She finally added, said Grandma Merla wanted the better sunlight. My chest tightened, but I kept my voice soft. You shouldn't have had to leave your room. She shrugged, though I saw the sting behind her eyes. It's not just that. It's everything. They fight all the time now, and no one ever listens to Jules cry. Grandma Merla says it's just noise. After breakfast, we walked the trail behind the cabin. She collected pine cones. I pointed out birds she used to know the names of. It felt like breathing again. That afternoon, she helped me gather firewood and sweep the porch. Every task she took on like it meant something. Like this wasn't just a visit. Can I stay with you for a while? She asked. Voice barely above a whisper. I met her eyes. You can stay as long as you need. We spent the evening reading by the fire. She found an old book of her grandfather's and asked if she could keep it near her bedroll. I told her he would have liked that night, as she drifted to sleep under the same blanket we'd shared the night before. I stepped outside for air. The night was quiet, still, but I knew, without a doubt, that the storm inside the Voss house had only just begun. Back in their house, the absence of Nora settled like a fog no one knew how to clear. Kalina found the note she left behind on her pillow, short and carefully written. I'm with Grandma. I'm safe. Don't worry. That only made her panic more. She called my number twice, then 3 times, before sitting on the edge of the bathtub, breath shaking in her hands. Grayson didn't even pause the football game when she told him. She's just being dramatic, he muttered. She'll come home when she's bored. She's 10. Grayson, Kalina snapped. She left without telling us. That's not normal. Neither is letting my parents be treated like second-class citizens. He shot back. They deserve respect. Nora needs to learn that. Meanwhile, Jules had developed a rash from a detergent Merla insisted was all natural. He cried more now. Unsettled and overtired, Conrad grumbled about the noise. Merla blamed Kalina's lack of discipline. No one offered to help. Dinner that night was frozen lasagna. Merla refused to eat it. Where's the fresh basil? She asked. Disgusted, Kalina didn't answer. She simply stared at the empty seat where Nora used to sit. Later that evening, Kalina received a school notification with a video attachment. The title read, Grandma's House. She clicked it without thinking. Nora's voice filled the screen, calm and steady. I live with my grandma now. She makes me pancakes and teaches me how to stack firewood. I feel safe here. I don't have to listen to people yell anymore. I sleep through the night. Kalina didn't realize she was crying until the screen blurred. That night, for the first time in years, she sat in the dark and said nothing. No arguments. No excuses. Just silence and the weight of what she'd let happen. It was early when the call came. I was peeling apples by the window. Nora still asleep under the quilt. Her hair fanned out like soft brush strokes across the pillow. The phone buzzed against the counter. And for a long moment, I just let it ring. But I picked up. Kalina's voice cracked before she even got through my name. Mom. I'm sorry. I didn't say anything. I let the silence hold her. They're awful, she whispered. Grayson's parents. I thought it would help having them here. I thought maybe I could finally breathe. But it's worse. I sat down at the table, the apples still in my hand. And Grayson, he doesn't see it. Or maybe he doesn't want to. Nora. She was right to go, and I let her leave. She didn't leave you, I said quietly. She came to me because she needed something safe. That's not the same. She sniffled. Jules cries all the time now. They just close their door and tell me to handle it. I haven't slept more than a few hours a night. I miss her. I miss you. I closed my eyes. My voice came low and clear. When I lived there, I carried more than groceries. I carried the silence between your fights, the weight of expectations no one spoke aloud. You didn't see it then. Maybe now you do. I do. I heard her breathing on the other end. Shallow and unsure. Will you come back? Just for a little while. Help us. Put things back together. I looked toward the bedroom where Nora was still sleeping. Peacefully, her chest rising in a steady rhythm I hadn't seen in months. No, I said. I can't come back to that house. But I'm not gone. Kalina, you're still my daughter. And Nora is still my heart. But this is where I live now. There was a pause. Not angry. Just real. I understand, she said softly, after we hung up. I stepped outside and opened all the windows wide. The air smelled like rain and pine. It felt like something beginning again. The days settled into a rhythm I hadn't known I needed. Nora and I woke early, tended to the small garden bed behind the cabin, and split firewood side by side. She grew proud of the blisters on her palms, the splinters she pulled out with a grin. There was no television, but we didn't miss it. In the evenings, we read aloud. She liked the old mystery novels I used to save for rainy days, and when we tired of those, we made up stories of our own. I let her paint a mural on one of the cabin walls, big swirls of lake blue and wild pine green. Sometimes she'd ask about her grandfather. I told her stories she'd never heard, how he once tried to build a tree swing and ended up flat on his back in the garden, how he carved her name into a plank of wood when she was born. We found it in the shed, and she hung it proudly above her bedroll every night. She slept through without a sound. That alone was enough. One afternoon, while I was inside simmering soup, she called out for me to come quickly. She had her school tablet propped against a log and was recording. "Can you film this part with me?" she asked. Tugging my sleeve, I stood beside her as she spoke into the lens. "This is my grandparents' cabin," she said softly. "My grandpa built that shelf himself. And that old rocking chair. My grandma kept it just the way he left it. Every corner here feels like them, like how they built something quiet, something safe." Then she looked up at me, her voice steady. "This is my grandma. She takes care of this place like it's alive. She keeps it warm and clean. She makes tea from pine needles and lets me help with the firewood. She listens. She makes me feel like I matter." She smiled. A small, honest thing. I live with her now, and I'm happy. I didn't say a word, but she knew. She always did. Later that evening, as the sun bled into the trees, she uploaded the video for her teacher. I didn't ask whether Kalina would see it. I already knew she would, and she did. A week later, a message came through. It was from Kalina. Short. Quiet. Thank you for keeping her whole. I'm trying to do better. That night, while Nora sketched trees by candlelight, I reached into the desk drawer and pulled out the property deed. The deed was older than Nora. Folded and refolded so many times the edges had softened, the ink faded in places. My name stood clear on the signature line. Alongside his, my late husband's mark. The looped L that had always made me smile. We'd bought the land together. No bank, no loan. Just a handshake deal with a man who believed in dreams and paper maps. For years, I let this place go untouched, the memory of him too thick in the air. But now, it lived again. I smoothed the creases, slid the deed into a new folder, and placed it in the small safe tucked behind the pantry shelf. No one knew it existed but me. The next morning, Nora helped me hang wind chimes outside the kitchen window. She chose them from a tiny shop in town, soft bronze bells and wooden leaves that clinked with each breeze. This feels like our real home, she said simply. It is. I told her. I didn't call Grayson. I didn't need to. Word travels in small towns. Kalina knew where I was. She'd made her peace with it, even if it stung. There were no grand confrontations, no apologies dragged into the light, just the quiet absence of expectation. Jules would grow. One day, maybe he'd visit. And if he did, I'd be here. Not as a backup plan or a built-in babysitter, but as myself. Some afternoons, I saw the shape of what used to be how I'd stretch myself thin for their comfort. How easily I'd handed over pieces of myself. That was over. Now, I painted again. I sang old songs while Nora braided my hair. We cooked from scratch. We argued gently over how long to steep tea. The world shrank, and in doing so, felt fuller. I still lived here, like before. Only now. No one else could touch it. Only now. It was mine. Only now. I was home.